There were a litany of events happening in Ghana all throughout 2019 to commemorate the 400 years of people of African descent being in the United States.
My name is Jasmine Griffiths. I am the lead at the British High Commission for Diaspora Affairs. I am honoured to welcome you to the Beyond the Return breakfast.
During our visit in December 2019, the official Year of Return Committee hosted a breakfast at the upscale Kempinski Hotel Gold Coast City in Accra to recognize this major event. Many governmental leaders were there, as well as England's ambassador to Ghana, Ian Walker, and the U.S. ambassador, Stephanie Sullivan. So things been going well?
Absolutely. This is a fantastic year to be here. Year of return. See what happens next.
Now, how long have you been ambassador here?
A year.
Okay. It was a festive occasion, but it was also very hot. Ghana's president, Nana Akufo-Addo, spoke about how vital the 2019 project was to the country, and that it was his desire that it not just be a one-time thing for the purpose of tourism.
Let us imbibe in ourselves deep consciousness and understanding of the goals and history of the African people. The second half of the 20th century witnessed a great blow for human freedom and progress when the African people, in the wake of Ghana's shining example, liberated themselves from the colonial and imperialist yoke and the racist ideology of apartheid, and emerged as free, independent people to construct new nations in hope and advancement. The first half of the 21st century should consolidate this development and see the growth of modern, prosperous, technologically advanced nations within a united Africa, which will make a reality of the dream of the 21st century as the African century, and bring dignity and respect to black people all over the world. Thank you once again to all those whose contributions in diverse ways helped in making the Year of Return a success.
My visit to Ghana would not be complete if I didn't get a few words personally with President Akufo-Addo. So me and my Ghanaian production team got to work to make that happen, and it did. I was placed in a car in the presidential motorcade, and we traveled to the Golden Jubilee House, the official residence and home of the Ghanaian president. President Akufo-Addo welcomed me into his office, where we sat down to discuss his vision for the future between Ghanaians, Africans, and African Americans. President Addo, I surely appreciate you sitting down with me. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much.
You came to the United States in 2018 to announce a year of return. Are you even shocked with the response this initiative has gotten, not just from African Americans, but folks in the UK, folks in Canada, and from other countries?
I don't know whether shock is the word, but certainly, let me say, it's more than I expected. I had hoped that it would have a big resonance, but it has, I think, had a much bigger resonance than I had anticipated. It's a very welcome one. If you want us to use the word shock, all right, but it's a very welcome shock, and I'm very happy that the initiative has evoked the response that it has.
Obviously, there's an economic piece to it in terms of for the tourism industry here in Ghana, but also for so many people, it has been deeply personal. Individuals, they've shed tears, the historical impact as well. What did you want people? What did you want, and what do you want them to get out of this experience of returning to Ghana, many of them for the first time?
I think really something quite simple, a recognition that really we are all the same. We are from one family. We are now divided by the ocean, the Atlantic, and of course by the history, very tragic history, but that essentially we are still one family. And I'm hoping that this whole Year of Return thing would allow people to see that, and therefore give us an opportunity to really solidify the relations between us on both sides of the Atlantic and see ourselves as part and parcel of one African family. I think it's important for us. It's important for our sense of self-worth. It's important for our sense of identity. And certainly it is important for any effort that we're making to empower ourselves in the world.
The first president of this country, President Nkrumah, educated at a historically black college in the United States, there's always been this relationship between many African leaders and HBCUs and America as well. What do you hope comes out of this in terms of a better or different relationship with African Americans, especially when it comes to commerce, when it comes to investment, when it comes to partnership?
I think once the acknowledgement, the recognition, the awareness that we're part and parcel of the same family, on that you can build everything else. You can build cultural exchanges, commercial exchanges, investment cooperation. Whole edifice can be founded once that fundamental base is recognized. We are part and parcel of the same family. Then on it you can build all the relations that suggest themselves. And that, of course, is building the economic relations. At the end of the day, people are identified by the level of prosperity, the level of development that they've attained. And I think that together, if we forge this relationship, we can assist ourselves and reinforce ourselves to be able to lift ourselves up. And I think it has the possibility of taking us to a new space, and therefore a new recognition by the world of who we are as a race, as a people.
This morning at the breakfast, you talked about moving forward. And what was really interesting to me when you talked about the impact of the Chinese diaspora on China and its development. And as I was listening to that, what you were essentially saying is that, look, when you look at the African diaspora, there is an opportunity here to really take this country, take this continent to a whole new level with the folks who are part of the diaspora.
Absolutely, absolutely. Those who went to America and the Caribbean are part of the most developed economy in the world today, especially the American economy. And my understanding would be that if this connection, if this awareness is there, there's a lot that can come from that end for this process of our mutual development. And for me, this is one of the main outcomes I'm looking at, how we can join the bridge across the Atlantic, how we can forge it in such a way that trade and investment and commerce come both sides of the Atlantic together.
How do you also see changing or working to change people's view, what's really between their ears? So for instance, for African Americans, our view of Africa has been informed by white supremacy. African nations, colonization. I spoke at a church on Christmas Day here, and I said that really what is required is a massive reprogramming as to how we see ourselves versus what we've been taught about ourselves.
And this is why it is so important to have this personal, physical contact, for people to come here and see where we are. And in the process, of course, a lot of our own people will be going across as well and see how the conditions under which Black people live in America. But you cannot ever, ever escape the significance of that personal contact. The coming of lots of people from the Caribbean and from the Americas here was tell them that much of what they have been fed, much of the views of Africa that they have been fed do not correspond to anything, the reality. That we are not, in fact, just swinging on trees here. That there's a lot of development that is taking place here.
And also, unlike what was said by Donald Trump, these are not shithole countries.
I says, absolutely not. I said so at the time to him, that I thought that was an unfortunate statement for an American leader to make. We're not, Ghana certainly is not a shithole country. And as I say, the coming over is a way of opening up the consciousness, the awareness. And that is what you're talking about when you say what is between here. Mm-hmm. It is a question of the awareness, the expansion, the consciousness, and seeing that really people here, like you over there, we're all part and parcel of the same human race. We're part and parcel of the human family. And in our particular case, we have the added proximity of all being black people. And myself, I think that if we're able to forge this relationship, the beginnings is what we're seeing now. You spoke about Kwame Nkrumah in the early days. I think that we have advantages here which were not present in his time. Communication, especially, and all the new technology that connects people. All of that, if we bring all of that into play, we have the opportunity really to build a really new relationship that can be very strong, which we can benefit from, you on that side, us on this side as well.
Well, communication is important. When I met the Asante King, there were several individuals who work at the palace who saw me and they say, I see you on YouTube, Facebook. We're gonna make sure you meet the king. And so it has been interesting traveling the country. I've been to several different cities. We've been shooting lots of interviews, and individuals who not necessarily who saw me when I was on CNN, and I haven't been there in 6 years, but who are seeing me on the internet. That's how we're and are seeing the conversations, the stories that we're doing. And certainly when we take this back, being able to show that, to give people a different view that's unfiltered, which is also the name of my show, because it's not a matter of doing it through somebody else's lens, really through this perspective.
Yes, and that is, I think, also the other very important aspect of the CEO of Return, that we have a way so that we can tell our stories to each other ourselves without the filter of third parties, so that what you see here in Ghana are your own impressions. They're not the impressions that have been imposed on you or forced on you or which have influenced you, but your own direct, personal, sensory perceptions of what is going on. And I think it's very, very important in when you're trying to build a relationship of sincerity and integrity, that it should be informed mostly by the personal responses, reactions that you get from being amongst people, from interacting with people. And I'm hoping that this year of Return, and then we find a way which we can build on it to maintain this interchange, this intercourse, as a permanent feature of our lives.
Got to get your thoughts on several Western African nations saying they're not going to use the CFA. And it's interesting, I had the former ambassador to the African Union on my show several times, and she's really been talking about Africans being independent and really forging his own path in his economy. You made comments when you were when the French president, where you made it clear, stop looking at Africa in terms of development aid, well, in terms of charity, look at this in terms of investment. And so I think those two, what you said then and then that action they just took, really speaks to saying, no, we are seeing ourselves and projecting ourselves in a much different way, especially with this.
And we have to. It just doesn't make sense that the richest continent in the world should be inhabited by the poorest people on the globe. It doesn't make any sense. And it is largely because of the relationships that have been forged both in colonial and post-colonial times that ties us down and makes the exploitation of our resources benefit people outside the continent and not ourselves. I find the decision that the French, the so-called Francophone African states have taken in Weimar now to want to chart an independent path for their currency, an extremely positive and significant step in the efforts we're making to integrate the continent, create the single market, create a single currency. I think they've shown a lot of courage in turning their back on 50 years of post-colonial history and now decided to chart their own way independently of France. I think it's an extremely important, very, very significant step that they're taking, and a very welcome one. Everything that we require to bring prosperity to our people is here, except the systems that we have unfortunately allowed to dominate our lives. The time has come for us to free ourselves of those systems, use our resources for ourselves, look a little bit more inward than we have been doing, recently, and seeing that the opportunities for development are right there in front of us. What we need is a mental and intellectual organization to make sure that these resources are used in a really positive and progressive manner.
How do you see African Americans helping with that?
See, African Americans as being part of the African family. And once they wake up to the idea that there is this huge reservoir of people, of talent, of resources that exists on the continent to which they can fit themselves so easily, I think it could be a major, major incentive for people in the entertainment world, in the business world, those who are in agriculture, in the colleges, in academia. All of these can all come together and work towards this new. Some of these words sometimes sounds a little bit grandiose. You talk about Renaissance, but I can see the possibility of a new rebirth and revival of the black peoples of the world, in which hopefully the year of return will prove to be an important ingredient.
And timing is important because in the United States, I mean, we're 24 years away from America becoming a nation majority people of color. That's by 2043 that's going to happen. It's between Latinos, African Americans, Asians, Native Americans will be the majority in the country. You look at what's happening in Europe as well. Many of those countries are freaking out because the reality is in Germany, in Italy, in those countries, whites are not, their population is shrinking. And so, the next generation will be a generation that already the world is 2/3 people of color. But when you talk about Western countries, they're going to be dominant. And so to me, this is where these 24 years, the next quarter of a century to me is important for African Americans, other people of color to really say, let's be in position to assume power and not be in a situation where we have numerical numbers, unfortunately, but not have the opportunities controlling the political and economic levers.
So the solution, for me, the solution is the development of this continent. That is the catalyst. That is what is going to make the difference in this trajectory that you've outlined. It's the development of Africa. And I think that this century, the reordering and reorganization of the world that is going to take place, the most significant contribution is going to be made from this continent. And once we have turned on the key, we have found the key for our own organization, for the organization of the black peoples of the world, we're going to make a significant difference to the way the world has worked up till now.
Last question for you, Reverend Leon Sullivan. For a long time was about forging those relationships. Do you plan, I understand next year's an election year, you'll be busy here, but do you plan to organize, let's say, a 1-day or a 2-day conference in the United States that not driven by the government, but really pulling together the best and brightest, those minds, economic and culture of African Americans, and bringing others as well. To say, let's sit down and make it happen.
I think it's a very good idea. And these are the things that Akwesi Agyeman and the people who are going to be in the forefront of what we're doing here are already trying to organize and deal with. But I think it's an excellent idea where we need to explore this and other ideas as well, so that we continue to keep alive this intercourse, this bridge across the Atlantic. We have to make sure that it is in place and that it's a two-way bridge all the time, the way we work.
Well, we'll be there to live stream the whole event so everybody can see it and participate. So we'll do that, and I'll be back soon because the Asante King is a big time golfer, and so am I.
Oh, I see.
And so when I told him I have a 6.6 handicap, his eyes lit up, and he said, "When are you leaving? Let's play." So he wanted to play this morning, but I had to be at your breakfast, so I have to come back.
All right.
So he and I can hit the golf course.
It's good, but it's good of you to have come.
Absolutely.
And we expect to see a lot of you.
I appreciate it.
Months and years ahead.
We'll be back.
It's
Mr.
good.
President, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate
indeed.
it. Thank you.
Thank you.
After my visit with the president, I then, of course, needed to make sure that my threads were taken care of. Now, when I visited Ghana in 2008, I got a chance to have several pieces made for me by Faustina Ansong, owner of Charisma Fashions. Folks, this is what her shop looked like in 2008. And this what it looked like in 2019. Boy, Faustina has come a long way.
All right.
Well, good to have you back.
Glad to be back.
Yeah.
I got stuff
Great.
to be made.
Good.
All right.
Yeah, so come in and have a seat.
All right.
During my trip, I purchased a number of kente cloth fabric at various places for myself, my wife, and my family. And I wanted Faustina to handle all of my outfits. So she and I got to work.
2 tops.
Yeah, you could do 2.
What do you think?
Yeah. 2 tops will look almost the same because it's the same fabric.
So what I'm thinking about that one, you made.
It's 2 yards.
That's 2 yards?
Yeah.
Hold up, something fell out.
Okay.
I knew something fell out.
Yeah.
You had made me a couple of those where that kente,
Right.
and it was just button sleeves.
Right.
And so I have a. So I'm thinking that could be done. Yep. Yeah, because that was the maroon one you made for me right there.
Right.
And you had round neck, and then it was just clamped at the top.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I've got some folks who are returning January 6th.
January 6th is about a week and a half from now.
It was already a long day, but I had to pay one more visit. So we stopped by Christian Action Faith Ministries Worldwide to visit with First Lady Rosa Whitaker, the wife of Archbishop Nicholas Duncan Williams.
A simple prayer.
But don't get confused. Whitaker isn't just a First Lady. She is CEO of the Whitaker Group, which handles product developments and investments in Ghana and elsewhere. She has offices in Ghana and Washington, D.C. Whitaker was the first U.S. trade representative for Africa and was a senior trade advisor for Congressman Charlie Rangel.
So how you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Welcome to Ghana.
Glad to be back. Glad to be back.
Good.
One of the things that was interesting to me when I was here in 2008, and I went back. I swear there was in the back of a car that I did not see a scripture. I didn't see some kind of reference. So here's the thing that's interesting to me. And I went back and told these people, I said, you have no idea how much there's a focus on faith and Christianity in Accra, Ghana, in Ghana. And people said, oh, I said, no, you don't understand. I said every card. There was some saying, there was a scripture, there was something on it. Were you surprised when you first came here?
Well, I started coming here in 1993, coming back and forth, and made Ghana my home about 10 years ago. And I was surprised, pleasantly surprised, because that is one of the things that makes Ghana very distinctive. Not only on the back of the cars, but it's also you find it on the names of businesses. Christianity is woven into the fabric of Ghanaian culture. And it's one of the things that I believe makes this country so special. And I believe that the country is fundamentally blessed. When you look at the phenomenal things that are happening in Ghana, I, as a woman of faith, attribute that to the faith of the Ghanaians. When we look at the fact that now Ghana is the fastest growing economy in the world, when I remember years ago, and I was working with this company as a client, they discovered oil here for the first time. And when you look at the growing and the growth of so many sectors, not that they're without problems, but fundamental to the Ghanaian people, you will see this element of faith and this kind of mindset of unlimited possibility thinking. I think that's attributed to the faith of the people here.
So what do you say to the person who goes, oh, but they're practicing white man's Christianity? Because I've already had people even remark it on social media, and I tell folks, well, if you're sitting somewhere else and you're not here and you haven't actually talked to folks and experienced it, you don't know what you're talking about.
Well, let me just tell you, I think that is part of the fundamental accusation that we as people of faith get all over the world about Christianity. And I think that there's a tendency to give the white man too much credit for Christianity. Christianity preceded, the white man's coming here. It is a strong faith. And I do not attribute the birth of that faith to white men. And I think that Ghanaians have embraced Christianity in a way that has made it their own. And so while we have a dominant culture in the world that have made Christianity very white, I think it's far beyond race. And I think that's what people use. And I think sometimes people use it for various reasons, sometimes to be divisive, and sometimes to embrace a form of religion, quite frankly, that I think traces its roots to paganism and witchcraft that I reject. So you will see that kind of conflict here, because some people will say, well, our origin of faith is this. And Christianity is from the white man. Christianity preceded the white man ever coming to Ghana. And I will not, like I said, give that credit to any race of people for Christianity. So I think even as we rediscover, while being in Ghana, the genesis of our own faith and our own roots, I don't think it's everything about our past that we should bring into our present and our future. Because some of what you see practiced in Africa, I'm just going to call it out for what it is. It is just witchcraft. And it's dressed up with a nice little bow and called Black culture, African, going back to your roots. It's witchcraft. And that is a kind of witchcraft that is not only a part of the African experience, but the experiences of other people. So I believe it's not everything from the past that is good. As we become more enlightened, as we become as we get more revelation about the Word of God, I think we have to act upon it. And just like I would not think we should embrace the form of Christianity practiced and justified by the slave masters, I also equally reject that.
I must say, are there any churches that don't have billboards? I mean, we're driving down the street. I'm like, man. I'm like, we've probably been to 5 or 6 cities since I've been here, and I'm sitting there going, dang. If people talk about the number of black churches in neighborhoods, black neighborhoods in America, I'm like, they come here, they'll totally freak out.
Well, you know what? The thing about it, it's very interesting, because when you have the opportunity to visit and live on both sides of the Atlantic, you see these differences. And we would attribute that many billboards with the face of the pastors, I know that was my initial reaction, to a form of narcissism that's unacceptable in Christianity. But here, it's not necessarily attributed to narcissism. It works. And it works because in my view, a lot of African people, I know Africa is not a monolith, but if you go to Nigeria, if you go to East Africa, you're going to see those billboards with the churches everywhere. I think it works because people are visual, and whereas we would put Hollywood on a billboard, they put men and women of God on a billboard, and they use billboards to spread the message about God, and they use billboards to put the word out. This preacher is happening, this service is happening. So it's not based on the same form of narcissism like we would attribute in a state. I think it's one of those things that just simply works.
You talk about being here since '93, and
well, I visited first.
Sorry, visited first, but living here since '93. The thing that I still find to be very interesting, are the number of people who just have no idea. I mean, you have the people who say, "Oh my goodness, is there hot water there?" And you're looking at them going, "Okay, you do know it's 2019." And I look at some of these comments, and it is stunning to me how so many of our folks have been conditioned based upon what they've seen, what they've been told by other people, what life is like in many African nations, as if you don't have skyscrapers, as if you don't have technology, as if you don't have many of the same things that you see in Europe and the United States as well. How often did you get that when you first started coming here, and people with those assumptions?
Well, unfortunately, I still get it.
Right.
And I have always gotten it since the first time I visited Africa was in 1984, and Zimbabwe, and then I eventually moved here and started spending time, but I visited for many decades before I ever started living here. But I also believe that part of that is by design. Self-hatred has been a very tragic part of our whole existence. And I'm not blaming anybody for it, but if you look at most characterizations of being of African descent in the world, it's with these kind of tags of being, with these kind of misrepresentations.
Well, if to be honest, I mean, it's driven through a white prism. I mean, the reality is, you grow up and you see these commercials. You think everybody on this continent. First of all, most people act like it's a country. It's a continent. That people are starving to death. Flies all around because that is in terms of what is driven. Then of course you take media, you take movies or whatever. Exactly the role that Tarzan played. And again, when those images are constantly being played back over and over and over again, it's reinforcing that. And I said this the other day on Christmas Day, and I spoke at a church here. I said for African Americans, our worldview was driven by white supremacy. View in Africa, it was driven from a colonial perspective. Exact same thing, but again, two different ways on how we looked at ourselves because the story and the narrative was driven by somebody else.
Yes, but I tell you, Roland, as true as that might be, I think that our bigger challenge today is us. Because there is no reason, when I look at the amount of wealth in the African American community, the role that technology has played, the fact that if we were a nation, we would be the 46th largest nation in the world, that we cannot rewrite our own history for our people.
I use the word reprogram.
Yeah, we should have done it by now.
I think it is, but I think again, as somebody, I went to communications high school, so I've been in media since I was 14 years old.
Wow.
And what I explain to people all the time is that I say, anytime there's a coup anywhere in the world, you get the guns first, and media is always second. And I think for a lot of people, not really understanding the power of the media. For African Americans, we watch TV more than anybody else. So you take the television we watch, compounded with the commercials that we watch, that we are getting a worldview more than anybody else that's driven through television and driven through images. And that, for so many people who don't understand how that medium is used, so therefore, what are you putting into your body, into your mind? What are you ingesting versus, well, wait, hold up. I need to reprogram my mind. No, I'm not going to watch that. The reason I hate Real Housewives shows because I'm like, that's a programming in terms of how we see.
But Roland, let me just put this to you this way. If we look at you, you are a tremendous asset in our community. You started when you were 14. You know this. I mean, you have reached,
I haven't changed in
I'm just
37
telling
years.
you, you have reached the level of mastery in this field. I think that's indisputable. We have that, we have a few others, some others, and then we have this tremendous wealth in our community. Why can't we have our own network? Why can't we have our own Al Jazeera? Why can't we have our own CNN? Why can't we have our own? Why are we not telling our own story?
Because what you just said, because I experienced it. I had a brother who told me, he said, man, when you going to get your own show? Now, this is when I had the morning show on TV. I said, I got my own show, 5 days a week. He said, no, I mean a real show. I said, a real show? He said, yeah, a real show. He said, like CNN or MSNBC. And I said, do you realize that when Brian Williams comes to Washington, D.C. to do the NBC Nightly News, Brian Williams sits in the exact same chair I sit in? He looked at me like I was crazy. I said, there's a glass table to the left. At the bottom of that glass table is a mirror and a bristle brush. Brian can't use a bristle brush. And brother, he still looked at me. I said, you don't realize we do my show at NBC News Channel. We send it to our center in Denver by the fiber line the exact same way they do. I said, so because it's on a black network, you don't think it's a real show. So therefore, what you're really saying is, if it's on MSNBC or CNN, which is white validation, now you think it's real.
Yes, because part of the challenge there is that we can have a show, that's progress, and we can even have a network, TV One and others, but we don't have the critical mass and the infrastructure.
There you go.
We don't have the ecosystem, and that's what makes this sustainable. And so, getting back to like Ghana, for example, I am so happy about the African Americans that have descended on Ghana like never before in history. I applaud President Akufo-Addo for a stroke of genius in inviting the return. I understand that they processed 750,000 visas from the U.S. Never before has that happened in history. And it reminded me of when W.E.B. Du Bois said, when he wrote the poem to his friend Kwame Nkrumah, that he heard, when he talked about Ghana, he heard the voice that loosened the chains in the dungeons of his soul. Something happens. But what I question is, what are we going to do with it? What are we really going to do with it? Because we need to take advantage of this awareness. We need to use this moment to make it very substantive. It's bigger than summitry and festivals, that's important. But we need to have a re-articulation, reimagining of what Pan-Africanism is. It has not been defined since the 60s. The previous generation, they've done their part. So now that we have this awareness, because I've heard the response of people talking about, oh, it's a reawakening. That is nice, that's a start, that's not sustainable.
Well, first of all, if you're a reawakening, okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Hey, now that you are awake.
What are we gonna do?
Okay.
So I've proposed something. I mean, Derek Johnson was here with the NAACP, and I've talked to members of the Congressional Black Caucus, and I said, whatever we wanna call it, let me give you a framework. A transatlantic shared prosperity compact, where we rearticulate and redefine Pan-Africanism based on shared prosperity. And from that, we have a group of partnerships, business to business, partnerships in faith, partnerships for scholars in education, which can really tackle that, rewriting scholars on both sides of the Atlantic, and educational exchanges that will rewrite the curriculum in the African school system, in our school system, in African American. And then we'd also have a to in culture. And if we get the right who in the room to do this, we can figure out the details.
Now you're gonna laugh at this one. So I interviewed the president, and I literally said, why don't you hold your own gathering in the United States and literally and bring those forces to the table? I said, Obama put this conference together when I said, don't have it government driven. I said, he's like, It's a good idea. And I just say that because you're absolutely right. That is in essence, look, Reverend Leon Sullivan did this.
Yes, and
He
it
did
died with him.
So I'm saying he did it for decades. And what has to happen, and I think unfortunately it happens too often in our community, something happens and then it's not handed off to continue. So therefore now all of a sudden we're starting it all over again, as opposed to, no, the framework was there. Because what you just described is literally what he was doing for 40 plus years. And so many people have no idea. First of all, a lot of people don't understand that Nkrumah studied at HBCU.
Yes.
Don't even realize the number of people who are working at these historically black colleges and universities and who are coming back to their various countries. And then that is the piece that, because it has to go beyond tourism.
Well, see, we have to reflect back on a past. You know, there's an African proverb that says, when you fail, don't look at where you fell, look at where you slipped and where you start getting off track. I think a lot of our things in the African American community, a lot of our initiatives, we've had some good successful ones, but they've been too personality driven. And I think it's the same reason why Africa's missed it. Things are not sufficiently institutionalized.
Right.
And so we see now what has happened this year, never happened before. The Africa Union passed a resolution commemorating and calling for this unification based on the 400th anniversary of the transatlantic slave trade. The congressional launched by the Congressional Black Caucus, the U.S. Congress, they had a parallel legislation, a commission established. Now, what do we do with that?
Right.
And that is usually where we get, so at least that's the antecedents of something that can be institutionalized. But I agree, but I can say that there's something happened, but we need some convening. Like, for example, President Macky Sall in Senegal is planning to do just what you talked about. He feels very passionate about it. He's establishing an Island of Gorée Memorial, which he wants to be the international memorial for to memorialize the transatlantic slave trade, because a lot of the slaves came from there, and also to be a hub for convening. And he has a great vision around it that started with Senghor. And he's planning to come to Washington this summer. He wants to do it at the Smithsonian Institute for, African American History, to address the African American leadership, political leadership, business, culture, media, about this vision to kind of coalesce people. And I know privately and even publicly, President Akufo-Addo has been doing the same. We have other people talking about it. Now, how can we connect the dots?
Absolutely.
Because honestly, that would be so incredibly transformative. When I look at, and part of the other problem, we focus too much on our differences. I do not fall into that litmus test. Well, you all are very different from the Africans. I said, well, who is the same in any group of people? We are supposed to be different, and the diversity of our views, that's part of our strength. But let's focus on what we can agree on, and we can work around that. What we can agree on is that people of African descent are the poorest people in the world, period. That's unacceptable. We have 422 million African people living in poverty. We have 9 million African Americans out of 40 million African Americans living in poverty. Yet, we have Africans sitting on some of the most valuable strategic resources in the world. Even if you want to talk about Africa's subsoil assets, we're talking about $23 trillion. We have an African American community that spent $1.2 trillion in spending in consumerism. It's not really rocket science if we really get intentional about putting it together.
I posted something on my Twitter page, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, while I was here, and I said African Americans should be looking at the economic opportunities in Ghana and Africa, and all these people. What is that going to do for the people here? And I said, you do know that people in other countries go to other countries and invest and start businesses, get rich, and send the money back. And I'm sitting here and I'm going, I said, 7 of the 10 fastest growing economies right now are African nations. Why in the world would we not be trying to figure out how to connect? I said, because the Lebanese are,
Yeah,
the Chinese
everyone
are.
is a
I said,
figure-
now, if everybody else is seeing what's happening, how in the world are we so isolated to somehow think that no, we should only be talking about how do we build businesses here in America? I said, it's called global capitalism.
Yes.
I said, everybody else is doing it. We will be crazy to do it. And it's with people who look like us.
Yes. You know, I have spent over 40 years promoting economic trade and investment. I was very honored to have served, come into the Clinton administration as the first assistant U.S. trade representative for Africa, stayed on a year with President Bush, and was one of the architects of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, where so many opportunities have flowed and emerged from that. And I'm just looking at the fact that in the U.S., we just created this $60 billion U.S. Finance and Development Corporation, which provides some financing, investment capital for these kind of partnerships. Why are we not aware and part of it? So I want to applaud you, Roland, because you've really been talking about the right things. Even around the African Growth and Opportunity Act, I used to work for Charlie Rangel, and I worked in his office. We worked on that for 5 years. And we created that with a vision that our people would benefit. Now, as a result of that, even last year, we had about $15 billion in trade between the U.S. and Africa happen as a result. That was the genesis of the investment funds created by the U.S. OPIC for Africa. Where is and where was the African American community? And it goes right back, in my view, to what you just started with. It is the perception. It is that we have not taken control of the storytelling. We've not taken control of the narrative. Even the most educated people in America are ignorant about Africa. Do you believe, as an African American business person, that you could go to Russia or Europe and be more successful than you can be in Africa? I'm glad to say that we have some businesses who have taken the leap, African Americans, and are doing quite well. If you go just a mile from here, you'll see Luca Health, owned by African Americans, some African American housing. I'm just looking at, for example, you know for yourself, where we are really strong, we're strong in every sector in the African American business community, but we've been really strong in housing development. We've been really strong in those areas. In Ghana alone, we have a 2 million unit deficit in housing.
Wow.
Yes, in housing.
2 million.
2 million unit deficit.
In fact, it's interesting. I ran to, we were in Kumasi. I ran to the, we were here to the Cultural Center. I ran to the mayor of Kumasi, and we did a quick interview. And he talked about, he said, we're a city of 3 billion people, but 1.5 billion more come in every day. And he said, we don't want that many people driving. So he said, we want to build residential housing. We want to build outlying parking structures so they're taking public transportation in because of how it's impacting the environment. You need expertise. You need knowledge. Who can actually do that? Who can? And so because see, the criticism that I've always laid for what happens in the United States is that what we don't have is capacity. You got 2.6 million black-owned businesses. 2.5 million have one employee.
Yeah.
And so what I keep saying is people are like, we need more black-owned business. I'm like, no, we don't. We need more with capacity. And so if you believe that you're not getting the capacity or have the ability to have capacity in the United States.
Do you know the best way to get capacity? When in my own company, when opportunity exceeded my capacity, I expanded through partnerships. And so you can expand through strategic partnerships with African companies. It's not rocket science. The question is, why is it not happening? A lot of it goes back to this perception issue. A lot of it goes back to, we need to get the truth out, the facts out. We need to control our own story. We need to control the narrative. Even when we look at philanthropy, when I am so pleased about philanthropy, and charity, and Africa needs that. But charity and philanthropy, that's very good for crisis situation. But you've never built an economy on charity and philanthropy. So Africa needs to build and grow its economy, and that's what's happening. It's just that we're not present enough, like every other part of the world, on education, job creation, technology transfer, skills development. All of that is the same formula. And so, and when I even tell people that even if you look at philanthropy, African American giving is 25% greater than all other Americans. And so we are giving people, we are business people. Africans are naturally entrepreneurs, because when you talk about why the church is looming so large, because the needs of African people across the continent far outstrip the capacity of the governments to do it. And so if you look at, you're now in my church, I wear many hats, and I'm very honored to be First Lady of this church, one of the largest in West Africa, and well, I'll say in Ghana for sure. And if you go around our campus, you will see a clinic, you will see a university, you will notice that the doors never close. You can come here. You'll see a food pantry, you'll see a television, you'll see a bank. We have a bank. And the price of admission for that bank is that they had to train our people. We don't own the bank, I should say. They had to train our people in financial literacy, and they had to put our people in mortgages on some concessional terms, because the concept of church is taking care of the needs of the community.
It's transactional.
And it's because you have, how can you be in a body of Christ and have people with so many needs? And we don't have like welfare here and a lot of the social support, and not take care of those needs. So we have a system here where the lawyers in our church, albeit informally, they are together to take care of some of the people who can't. It's like legal aid. Gotcha. So it births, and we're not the only churches. So it reminds me of similar to the way the African American churches. I mean, if you go in Washington, if you look at Bible Way, I mean, they own blocks, and they're taking people.
It's not just a church, it's community.
There's a community.
Right.
And so that's the way I would probably describe a lot of the church growth and church life in Africa.
Well, I am hopeful, just as you are, that with all the folks, and I've had people on my social media pages who've been seeing stuff we're posting. Oh my God, I can't wait to visit. I mean, do understand that we have to change your narrative, and I really do hope that folks, what you talked about in terms of all those facets being brought together and putting folks in the room to say, look, opportunity is there. Somebody is going to take advantage of it. We already see it happening. Other nationalities taking advantage of it. Black folks, it's there. We're connected now. Let's go.
And we're welcomed. But Roland, let me just say, you've been a forerunner. I've followed your career, and I hope that you will be a forerunner on this new movement, what I call the redefinition of Pan-Africanism in the 21st century context. Because one thing about technology that you've mastered is the great equalizer.
Yes, it is. That's why I created the digital platform. I mean, when people, it was very interesting. So when the TV One show got canceled, people were like, okay, but I'd love you to go back to MSNBC. I said, no, I'm good. And I said, first of all, I was at CNN for 6 years. Great, it was wonderful. I said, let me be as frank as possible. This person, they thought I was nuts. I said, I'm not really trying to ask a 32-year-old white producer, can I go cover black people? And they sort of sat, they were like, whoa. And I had to remind folks that I ran 3 black newspapers. My first internship was at a black newspaper. First time I got paid in media was from a black newspaper. Okay. And I got paid by Black Network before CNN did. And so same thing, when I'm talking about this reprogramming. The fact that, so for this, because I own my own digital platform, because I own these cameras, because I have the ability to pay the crew, I'm not asking somebody, can I go tell this story? I said, no, we're doing it. And I had to remind this person that when I was at CNN, and Winnie Mandela came to Birmingham, Alabama, they couldn't get anybody to interview her, all the different anchors and reporters, so they came and asked me. I was like, okay, fine. So I got on and interview her, and when we do the interview, we come back, and then they said, well, why didn't you ask her this, this, this? And I said, why in the hell y'all didn't go talk to her? I said, I'm sorry. I asked her what I wanted to ask her. And they said, well, we're not going to run the interview. I said, okay. I went to the president network. I said, give me the interview. I'm running on my TV One show. And he did. When she died last year, we restreamed that interview. That interview would have never been seen had I not said, give it here, I'm running it. And that is the thing for me that I'm not interested, and I never have been, but I'm not interested in asking, with all due respect, anybody white, can I talk about black people?
Well, let me just say that, we have 7 billion people in the world, and that's going to increase by 2035 by 2 billion people. And 600 million, and 1/3 of those people are going to be African people. And there's a demographic dividend here because Africa is the youngest continent in the world. And so now through digital media, you can reach that Africa will have a bigger population than China and Russia, and I know those are countries,
right?
But Africa's a continent, but it's a very balkanized continent. So when we talk about a critical mass of people, when we talk about growing in every direction, growing economically, growing in terms of population, youngest continent in the world, but in a few years, in less than a decade, 1 in every 4 workers will be African. So as you execute this vision, which I ask God to bless you for it, keep in mind, what you do anyway, but that the bigger, broader population will be African, and you don't need that old infrastructure to reach them anymore. They get it on their phones. In fact, increasingly in Africa, television is becoming obsolete. So I said, I believe it's going to be like those landlines. African countries had invested all this money in landlines, and it was wasted because they leapfrogged and went into mobile phone. It was a mobile phone revolution, and more people were on mobile phones. And that's what's happening now. And that is a game changer that's going to allow these partnerships and these relationships to forge like never before. And when we talk about partnerships and relationships, I know people think, this is an old form of racism. And I was like, no, unity and building on a common heritage and building on a common vision instead of focusing on differences, that makes the entire world better. There is no racism about that. That is something that I think people should be very proud of. And I think you playing a really key role in this. And I really do wish you all the best.
Appreciate it. Well, we're going to keep telling the stories and speaking truth. And like my philosophy is still the same. If you do good, I'll talk about you. If you do bad, I'll talk about you. At the end of the day, I'm going to talk about you.
I heard you talking about some people, but you know what? Don't lose your courage.
Oh, no.
I think it's too late for that.
You're right. At 51, that ain't going to happen.
No, that's not.
Right.
I doubt it.
No, not going to happen.
No.
In fact, I got more than when I was younger.
Yeah? Well, that's the thing about courage. When you stand up a few times, you get more courage.
That's the only way it rolls.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thank you
Thanks
so
a lot.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.